Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. Michael Mann is probably the most dishonest climate scientist, but Katharine Hayhoe comes in a close second. She has me and all of my followers blocked on Twitter, but she made this tweet this morning. In her tweet, she claimed that the area of the U.S. burned by wildfires every year was increasing due to climate change, and she said it in capital letters. But look where she started her graph, in 1984. And she referred to the National Climate Assessment, which she was one of the authors of. Here is the key page from the final report of the National Climate Assessment. And over here on the right side is the wildfire graph, which went out to policymakers and journalists. Let's take a closer look at that. The data starts in 1983. So you're probably asking, why did they start the data in 1983? Well, I'm going to show you. This graph from the U.S. Forest Service shows burn acreage going back for 100 years. It's pretty easy to see what's going on. There was a lot more burn acreage prior to 60 years ago. And no surprise, look where Katharine Hayhoe started her graph, in 1984, right at the low point. So over here I superimposed the National Climate Assessment graph on top of the Forest Service graph, and you can see exactly what they've done. They hid all of the years which showed that forest fire burn acreage was massively decreasing in the United States, not increasing. The pink rectangle shows all of the data that's being hidden in the National Climate Assessment and in Katharine Hayhoe's tweet. This is as bad as climate fraud gets. Now let's look at this year's burn acreage from the National Interagency Fire Center. So far this year there's been about 4.4 million acres burned, and the fire season is just about over. The 4.4 million acres this year is third lowest in the last decade, and well below the 10-year average of 6.6 million acres. Another important fact is that the vast majority of the burn acreage this year was in Alaska. In the lower 48 states, this may have been the quietest fire year on record. Now let's place that 4.4 million number on Katharine Hayhoe's graph. You can see it's very close to the bottom. And let's look at the left side of her graph. She shows zero burn acreage in 1984. That's really credible. On this date in 1938, the New York Times reported there was a fire every 3 minutes in 1937, which burned almost 22 million acres. Compare the 22 million acres in 1937 to the 4.4 million acres in 2019. And remember that the vast majority of the 4.4 million acres this year was in Alaska, which wasn't counted in 1937. So realistically, there was more than 10 times as much burn acreage in 1937 as there was this year. Now let's read the first paragraph of the New York Times article. Every 3 minutes on the average during 1937, a forest fire started in the United States, but this year's total of losses was considerably under that of 1936. So as bad as 1937 was, 1936 was much worse. Now let's go back even further to pre-industrial times when atmospheric carbon dioxide levels were 280 parts per million. This 2001 report from the Department of the Interior, Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, EPA, and several other agencies said, in the conterminous United States during the pre-industrial period, 1500 to 1800, an average of 145 million acres burned annually. Today, only 14 million acres are burned annually. So burn acreage is down 90% from the days when CO2 is at pre-industrial levels. And remember, they're talking about the conterminous United States. This year was probably down 99% from pre-industrial levels. I've been tracking Katharine Hayhoe for about 10 years, and this is fairly typical behavior for her. She makes scientifically unsupportable claims over and over again based on cherry-picked data. And then she goes around speaking to Christian groups and tries to frighten them with her junk science. Katharine Hayhoe is a political hack and a propagandist, not a serious scientist. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.